The knife twisted, not in my flesh but in my soul. Suffering isn't about what happens to you, it's about the war you wage against it. If you crave escape from the relentless torment of emotional agony, you must first confront a harsh, often ignored truth. Suffering isn't inflicted by events themselves, but by your own fierce resistance to what is. A bitter pill, isn't it? Most stumble through life blind to this, lost in a labyrinth of inner chaos, endlessly replaying past hurts, completely unaware that they are the very architects of their own prolonged misery. They clutch their wounds like precious jewels, unaware they are slowly poisoning themselves. Carl Jung, a titan of psychology, distilled this truth with brutal clarity. What you resist persists. This isn't mere wordplay, a comforting cliché. It's a profound psychological and spiritual axiom that can ignite a complete metamorphosis of your existence, a fire in the night. Reflect deeply on this. Whenever a painful episode unfolds, a job lost, a love extinguished, a trusted friend turned Judas, a crushing setback, the initial emotional tsunami is undeniably human. Sadness claws at your throat, anger burns in your gut, disappointment weighs you down, fear paralyzes, confusion clouds your mind. These are the primal screams of the soul, valid and visceral. But here's the cruel paradox, the treacherous twist. The suffering that engulfs you doesn't emanate from the event itself. No, it's born from the internal battle, the relentless tug of war with reality. It's the insidious voice whispering in your head, "This shouldn't be happening. This is a cosmic injustice. I can't bear this." That internal rebellion, that stubborn refusal to embrace the present moment, transforms fleeting pain into agonizing, drawn-out torture. That is the true breeding ground of suffering. The human mind, that intricate and treacherous landscape, is inherently wired for control. We desperately crave life's adherence to our script. We recoil from discomfort with every fiber of our being. Predictability, stability, certainty, these are the false gods we worship. But life, that capricious mistress, disregards our preferences with brutal indifference. It dances to its own enigmatic rhythm. So what unravels when life hurls a curveball, a shattering blow? When plans crumble into dust, our primal instinct is to resist, to fight tooth and nail, to deny the undeniable. We scream, "This shouldn't have happened to me." And precisely in that instant, in that act of rebellion against the immutable reality, suffering takes root and festers. Consider a breakup, that searing wound to the heart. The natural pain of loss might endure for days, weeks, perhaps even months. But the suffering that festers for years, that deep, agonizing ache fueled by denial, by clinging desperately to the past, by endlessly replaying memories like a broken record, by clinging to the impossible belief that things should have unfolded differently. It's not the loss devouring you. It's your desperate refusal to release what already is. The same venomous truth applies to betrayal, failure, rejection, every form of loss. It's not the event that shatters you. It's the relentless internal resistance to accepting what has already irrevocably transpired. So, how do we shatter this cycle of self-destruction? The answer lies in a spiritual axiom that, when fully embraced, possesses the power to orchestrate a complete transformation: radical acceptance. Now, let's be unequivocally clear. Acceptance is not synonymous with passive resignation. It doesn't imply that you must like what transpired. It doesn't signify that you condone it or that it didn't inflict profound hurt. Acceptance, in its purest form, signifies the cessation of hostilities with reality. You halt the expenditure of your precious energy on a futile, unwinnable war. You cease resisting what is etched in stone. Instead, you seize that same energy, that potent force, and redirect it toward the only realm where you wield true dominion: your response. And when you finally accept what has occurred, truly, viscerally accept it, a profound shift begins. A lightness descends, a lifting of the crushing weight. Not because the pain magically vanishes, but because you've severed its lifeline. You're no longer fueling the inferno with your own resistance, fanning the flames of suffering. Picture someone unjustly fired from their job. If they cling to anger, blame, and the unwavering conviction that the dismissal was unjust, they can languish in that pain for years, harboring resentment toward the company, casting themselves as a victim, and dragging that festering wound into every future endeavor. But if instead they consciously choose to embrace what has transpired and ask, "What path can I forge from this wreckage?" they reclaim their stolen power. They cease dwelling in reactive mode and commence living with intention. The searing pain becomes a catalyst for profound growth, a crucible forging strength. That is the pivotal key. Everything hinges on your perception, your interpretation of events. Jung spoke often about the imperative to integrate every facet of our experience, even the most agonizing and unsettling. Because pain, when met with acceptance rather than resistance, undergoes a remarkable transmutation into wisdom, a treasure unearthed from the depths of despair. A colossal mistake, a trap we all stumble into, is the arrogant belief that our suffering is unique, an unparalleled burden, that no other soul could possibly fathom the depths of our torment, that our pain is somehow more excruciating, more unbearable than any others have endured. But the truth, harsh and humbling, is this: pain is a universal, intrinsic element of the human condition. Everyone suffers. The dividing line between those who ascend and those who remain mired in the depths is not the magnitude of pain endured, but their relationship to it. Those who resist pain, who fight against the tide, suffer. Those who accept pain, who surrender to its flow, grow. If you sincerely desire to heal, if you genuinely yearn for liberation, the first essential step is to cease warring against life itself. Accept what has happened. Accept that which lies beyond your capacity to alter. Accept what already is, and then, and only then, channel all your energy toward what you can change. And here's the secret whispered in the shadows: the truth about liberation from suffering that remains largely unspoken. The most jarring realization is that the majority of your suffering never originated from the event itself. It arose from the tenacity with which you clung to the pain, your desperate embrace of the torment. A relationship dissolved, leaving you heartbroken for years. But it wasn't solely the breakup itself. It was your unwavering refusal to release your grip, to sever the ties. Someone betrayed you, and you remained shackled to resentment. But it wasn't merely the act of betrayal. It was your fervent attachment to the burning embers of bitterness. An opportunity slipped through your fingers, leaving you feeling paralyzed in life. But it wasn't merely the missed chance. It was your obsessive preoccupation with what could have been a phantom limb forever aching. When you finally relinquish resistance, when you cease battling with reality, suffering begins to crumble, its foundations eroded. This doesn't imply that the pain vanishes overnight in a burst of miraculous healing. But it does mean that it loses its suffocating grip on you, the power to dictate your existence. And in time, that pain undergoes a profound transformation. It transmutes into a valuable lesson, not a lifelong burden, a ball and chain dragging you down. Now we delve into the deeper strata, the realms that most never even contemplate. How your unconscious mind actively conspires to keep you trapped in the labyrinth of suffering. Because once you grasp the core principle that suffering is the offspring of resistance, the next question inevitably arises. If I know this, why do I perpetually reenact the same destructive emotional patterns circling the drain? And this is where everything undergoes a radical shift, where the shadows begin to recede. Because once you unearth the hidden answer to that insidious question, you will awaken to a profound truth. You possess far greater agency over your life than you ever dared to imagine. So, continue to observe closely, for in the forthcoming section, we shall unveil something truly transformative. How your mind has been unconsciously conditioned to cling to suffering, and, crucially, what concrete steps you can commence today to shatter those patterns and reclaim your freedom once and for all. Let us begin with a stark, unvarnished truth. Your unconscious mind is programmed to relentlessly perpetuate your suffering. If you've ever experienced the sensation of pain materializing seemingly out of thin air, as though suffering is some malevolent entity stalking you, it is time to awaken to a truth that few dare to articulate. The unpalatable reality is this: you are the one reenacting your pain over and over without even a flicker of conscious awareness. Not because you consciously desire to suffer, but because your unconscious programming is relentlessly dragging you back into the same well-worn emotional loops, the familiar ruts of despair. The esteemed psychologist Carl Jung articulated this with incisive power in one of his most confrontational statements. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What Jung meant is that the recurrent pain you experience is not arbitrary, not random. It's not a cosmic vendetta, not the universe singling you out for inexplicable cruelty. It's not that you are doomed, cursed, or inherently unlucky. It's because, deep within the recesses of your subconscious, reside emotional and mental patterns that you are compelled to reenact automatically, like a puppet dancing to strings you cannot see. You relive them, not out of conscious choice, but because they are familiar, they are wired into your internal operating system. The unconscious mind operates like a clandestine software program, silently installed during your formative years. And if you were raised in an environment where love was inextricably intertwined with pain, where abandonment was commonplace, where safety was a fleeting illusion, then those toxic beliefs became your emotional blueprint, the foundation upon which your life is constructed. These weren't consciously chosen beliefs. They were passively absorbed, indelibly imprinted, and now they are running the entire show, pulling the levers of your existence. No one speaks of this insidious programming. Your unconscious doesn't prioritize your happiness or well-being. It only recognizes and craves what is familiar, the comfort of the known, however destructive. That is why, even when your conscious mind yearns to escape the suffocating grip of suffering, a deeper, more primal part of you persistently attracts the same kinds of people, the same volatile situations, the same predictable, agonizing emotional outcomes. It's not mere coincidence, it's a deeply ingrained pattern, a repetitive cycle. It's the invisible cage of the unconscious, the unseen bars of your prison. Have you noticed the uncanny knack you possess for consistently finding yourself entangled in relationships that inflict pain, that leave you wounded? Have you ever savored moments of genuine joy or success, only to inexplicably sabotage them, to witness them crumble into dust? Do you feel as though you are constantly confronted with the same recurring problems, even when you vow to yourself that this time will be different, that you will break free? That's not the capricious hand of bad luck. That's your subconscious mind relentlessly replicating what it knows, its twisted version of comfort. That's emotional self-sabotage at its most insidious. But why would anyone choose what destroys them, what tears them apart? The answer lies dormant within the lessons you absorbed during your childhood. If you learned that love was always shadowed by pain or abandonment, then as an adult, you will unconsciously seek out relationships that mirror that exact emotional landscape, that recreate that familiar torment. Not because you consciously crave suffering, but because that distorted version of love is what your nervous system recognizes, what it understands as the language of connection. It feels eerily, disturbingly familiar. And in the mind's perverted logic, familiar equates to safe, even if it burns like acid. If you endured rejection, humiliation, or neglect during your formative years, then today you might instinctively avoid opportunities, relationships, or pursuing your cherished dreams. Because a terrified fragment of you is convinced that the same devastating pain will inevitably return, that you are unworthy of anything better. You may unconsciously choose to remain within the confines of what feels safe, even if that safety is a prison built of pain, a cage of your own making. And here is the truth that strikes with the force of a hammer blow, the realization that cuts to the very core. As long as you remain blissfully unaware of these deeply ingrained patterns, you will be condemned to relentlessly repeat them for the duration of your life. And you will erroneously label it destiny, a predetermined path. You will utter phrases like, "Why do I always end up with the same type of person, the same brand of tormentor? Why does my life never truly change, never truly ascend beyond this plateau of misery? Why does everything inevitably go wrong? For me, why is my life seemingly cursed?" But the unvarnished truth is this: it's not life, it's not fate, it's not some malevolent force conspiring against you. It's you, faithfully reenacting a script that was meticulously crafted within you long ago, a program running silently in the background. So, how does one shatter this insidious, unconscious pattern of suffering? Here lies the fundamental key. You cannot alter what you cannot see. If you genuinely, sincerely desire to terminate this relentless cycle of emotional torment, the paramount, indispensable first step is to consciously recognize the destructive pattern you have been unconsciously embodying. You must drag it into the harsh light of awareness, exposing its insidious nature. Begin by posing a few profoundly honest questions to yourself, questions that demand unflinching introspection. What has been the dominant emotion pervading my life? Rejection? Abandonment? Betrayal? Frustration? Fear? What kind of relationships or situations do I consistently attract, the recurring characters in my drama? What insidious story am I perpetually telling myself about my intrinsic worth, about my capabilities, about the fundamental nature of the world around me? When you address these questions with unwavering truthfulness, something extraordinary begins to unfold, like the petals of a tightly closed flower slowly unfurling in the sun. You begin to realize that the suffocating suffering you have been experiencing hasn't been emanating from external forces, from the cruelties inflicted upon you by the outside world. It's been originating from within you, a self-inflicted wound. You have been projecting it onto the world, onto every interaction, onto every opportunity, with relentless consistency, often without the faintest flicker of awareness. And that single earth-shattering realization is the precise moment when everything commences to change. Breaking the cycle of emotional torment doesn't mean you will never again experience the sting of sadness, the burning rage of anger, or the crushing weight of frustration. These emotions are intrinsic to the human experience, the ebb and flow of the tides. But what it does signify is that you will no longer be a prisoner, a marionette, dancing to the strings of a hidden pattern that controls your every thought, word, and deed, operating beneath the radar of your conscious awareness. Because the instant you become consciously aware of your unconscious programming, you cease being its willing slave, its unthinking accomplice. You can't eradicate all pain from the tapestry of life, but you can cease recycling it, perpetuating its existence, unconsciously choosing to inflict it upon yourself without even recognizing your complicity. From that pivotal moment onward, you begin to consciously choose your path, to navigate life with intention rather than blindly reacting on autopilot, driven by forces you don't understand. And in the forthcoming section, we will delve even deeper, peeling back further layers of the onion. We will explore the central, pivotal role the ego plays in keeping you trapped in the depths of suffering, and crucially, what concrete steps you can take to dismantle its power before it continues to sabotage your life, leading you down a path of destruction. Because once you comprehend the insidious role of the ego in this twisted drama, that is when you will finally begin to reclaim your stolen power, the inherent sovereignty over your own existence. Let us now speak candidly about the ego, that treacherous imposter. The ego feeds off your suffering. It craves your pain like a drug. It actively keeps your wounds festering, preventing them from healing. If you are sincerely committed to shattering free from the destructive emotional patterns that continue to inflict pain upon you, then there is a vital truth you must understand, a key to unlocking the prison. Your ego is your greatest obstacle on the arduous path to true healing. The ego is that insidious inner voice that relentlessly convinces you that you are entirely justified in feeling hurt, that the world is inherently unfair, that others must change their behavior before you can experience even a modicum of happiness. It spins tales of self-pity and victimhood, narratives like, "I'm always the victim," or nothing ever works out for me. My life is destined to be a series of disappointments. But here is the unvarnished, brutal truth, the pill you must swallow. The ego doesn't want you to heal. It actively resists your liberation. Because if you were to truly heal, if you were to genuinely relinquish your grip on suffering, the ego would forfeit its very identity. It would no longer possess anything to feed upon, any justification for its existence. The ego thrives on conflict, on blame, on judgment, on the illusion of separation, the delusion that you are somehow distinct from the collective consciousness. It consciously creates drama, orchestrates chaos, simply to perpetuate its own existence, to keep itself relevant. It whispers insidious lies, convincing you that your pain is irrefutable proof that you are inherently right and the world is irrevocably wrong, that you are entirely justified in your simmering resentment, your simmering rage, that you need to cling tightly to your festering wounds, that they are badges of honor, proof of your endurance. But when you begin to perceive the ego for what it truly is, a mere defense mechanism, a fragile mask concealing your true self, a desperate survival strategy forged in the crucible of past traumas, you can initiate the process of disarming it, of defanging its venomous influence. You can embark upon the transformative journey of stepping into a deeper, more authentic version of yourself, a self free from the chains of the past. A self that no longer needs to desperately cling to pain in order to feel real, to validate its existence. A self that possesses no need to endlessly replicate the past, to replay the same destructive patterns in order to feel safe, to maintain a semblance of control. Because the unvarnished truth is this: healing is not about transforming into someone entirely new, some idealized version of yourself. It's about remembering who you were before the world ruthlessly imposed its narrative upon you, before the layers of trauma obscured your true essence. Carl Jung famously proclaimed, "The mind that creates the problem is not the same mind that can solve it." This statement encapsulates a profound truth, a key that unlocks the very mechanisms of our suffering. The part of you that has inflicted your emotional pain, that has perpetuated your torment, is inherently incapable of healing it. And that part, that destructive force, is the ego. The ego is not merely a voice echoing within your head, a constant stream of self-criticism. It is the very filter through which you perceive everything, the lens that distorts reality. And unfortunately, it is that very same ego that created your pain in the first place, that constructed the prison in which you languish. When you attempt to heal from within the confines of the ego, all you achieve is the reinforcement of the very suffering you are desperately trying to escape, the strengthening of the bars of your prison. But how does the ego consciously sabotage your emotional healing? How does it maintain its grip on your psyche? The ego is cunning, a master of deception. It doesn't overtly declare, "I want you to suffer, I crave your misery." Instead, it subtly whispers convincing reasons why you should continue to cling to your pain, why you are justified in nurturing your resentment. It will relentlessly remind you of every transgression committed against you, every act of betrayal, every perceived injustice, every instance where life felt inherently unfair, every moment of abandonment. It recycles those agonizing memories like a broken film reel, a loop playing endlessly, attempting to convince you that constantly dwelling on them somehow grants you a semblance of power, a feeling of control. But in truth, this only serves to keep you firmly trapped, locked in place. Trapped within the same cycle of pain, within the same emotional prison that the ego so meticulously constructed, its fortress of despair. One of the most insidious and dangerous tricks the ego employs is convincing you to identify with your suffering, to see it as an integral part of who you are. It convinces you that your pain is who you are, that it defines your essence. Without even a flicker of conscious awareness, you begin to define yourself through the distorted lens of your past wounds, the scars you wear like badges of honor. You start uttering phrases like, "I'm always betrayed," or "People always leave me, abandonment is my destiny," or "This always happens to me, I am cursed." And each time you utter those words, each time you entertain those self-limiting thoughts, you carve that identity deeper into your psyche, etching it into your very being. You unknowingly become loyal to your pain, embracing it as a twisted form of comfort, a familiar companion. The ego will also endeavor to convince you that the source of the problem lies outside of you, beyond your sphere of influence. It will relentlessly whisper that your pain is entirely someone else's fault, that you bear no responsibility for your predicament. That life inherently owes you something, that you are entitled to recompense for the perceived injustices you have endured. That your external circumstances must undergo a dramatic transformation before you can feel even a modicum of okayness, before you can grant yourself permission to be happy. And this is the perfect, inescapable trap, the meticulously crafted cage. Because if the solution always resides external to yourself, then you never have to take ownership of your own healing. You never have to confront your own shadows. You remain perpetually in a state of waiting, a passive observer, waiting for a heartfelt apology that may never arrive, waiting for justice to be served, waiting for someone to miraculously rescue you from your self-imposed prison. And as long as you are waiting, you are not actively moving. You are not consciously evolving. You are simply stuck, mired in the depths of despair. You see, the ego thrives on conflict, on comparison, on dredging up old wounds that never quite heal, because the ego itself keeps scratching at them, refusing to let them scab over until they bleed afresh. It thrives when you obsessively dwell on what went wrong, replaying every agonizing detail, nurturing your resentment. It keeps you shackled to a self-perpetuating cycle of self-pity, simmering resentment, and relentless blame. It relentlessly convinces you that you are inherently powerless, a mere puppet dancing to the whims of fate. This is the breeding ground, the very genesis of the insidious trap of victimhood, the insidious identity that can consume you. One of the most subtle and dangerous tactics the ego employs to keep you shackled, to maintain your weakness, is through the adoption of the identity of the victim, the helpless pawn. When you succumb to the clutches of victimhood, you begin to genuinely believe that every negative occurrence in your life is attributable to external forces, to the malevolence of other people, to the whims of bad luck, to the cruel hand of fate. And while it might initially feel as though you are protecting yourself by deflecting blame onto the external world, what you are actually achieving is the complete surrender of your personal power, the forfeiture of your agency. Because if you genuinely believe that you possess absolutely no control over the trajectory of your own life, you will never summon the courage, the motivation, the unwavering determination to take the necessary steps to actively change it. And that is precisely what the ego desires, to keep you small, defenseless, perpetually suffering, forever imprisoned. But here comes the harshest, most unpalatable truth of all, the realization that can shatter the illusion. No one is coming to save you, no knight in shining armor. No matter how profusely you weep, no matter how many times you hurl blame at others, no matter how loudly you lament your misfortunes, no one is going to magically rescue you from your self-imposed prison. The only person who possesses the power to shatter this destructive cycle is you, and you alone. So, how do you dismantle the insidious ego? How do you regain control over your life and reclaim your stolen sovereignty? The first and most critically important step is recognizing with unwavering conviction that you are not your ego. You are not your suffering. You are not your past. You are not that relentless inner voice that persistently whispers that you will always be a victim, that you are inherently flawed. The ego desperately wants you to cling to your pain, to embrace your suffering, because that is what sustains its existence. That is what fuels its twisted sense of purpose. But the moment you cease feeding it with your attention, with your emotional energy, the ego begins to lose its power. Its influence starts to wane. It begins to weaken, to crumble, to dissolve. And in that pivotal moment, something incredible, something transformative occurs. You begin to awaken, to emerge from the fog, to witness reality with newfound clarity. There are 3 potent, actionable steps you can commence practicing immediately to begin shattering the ego's suffocating grip on your life, to dismantle its control. Observe the relentless voice within your head, the constant stream of commentary. When the ego commences bombarding you with reminders of your past wounds, when it relentlessly reiterates its conviction that life is inherently unfair, when it attempts to lure you back into the depths of despair, pause. Don't react impulsively. Simply observe the voice like a detached spectator watching a play unfold on a stage. Realize with unwavering conviction that this voice is not you. It's merely a mental program, a destructive pattern, a recording playing on repeat. The more you observe it without identifying with its insidious narrative, the less control it exerts over you, the less power it wields. Cease feeding the story of your suffering, sever its lifeline. Every time you compulsively replay the agonizing story of how you were wronged, every time you tirelessly recount your pain to anyone who will lend an ear, you inadvertently reinforce that wound. You actively contribute to its perpetuation. You imbue it with more power, you strengthen its grip. Ask yourself with brutal honesty, does this story empower me, enabling me to transcend my limitations, or does it weaken me, chaining me to the past? If it weakens you, if it drains your energy, then you must consciously relinquish your grip on it. Stop rehearsing your pain, stop reliving the trauma. Actively do the opposite of what the ego instinctively urges you to do. Defy its expectations. The ego relentlessly pushes you to react impulsively, to lash out in anger, to harbor grudges, to remain perpetually bitter, to cling to resentment. But when you consciously choose to respond with calm, with detachment, with compassionate acceptance, you actively disarm the ego, you dismantle its weaponry. You reclaim your stolen power, you shatter its illusion of control. The moment you begin to truly see the ego for what it truly is, a fragile construct, a defense mechanism, a desperate attempt to protect yourself, its insidious control begins to crumble. Its influence diminishes. You cease feeling the desperate need to cling to pain to justify your suffering. You cease needing external validation. You no longer crave the approval of others to validate your worth. You cease identifying yourself as a victim of your circumstances, as a helpless pawn in the hands of fate. And in that moment of profound clarity, you realize something powerful, something transformative. The suffering never truly originated from what happened to you. It wasn't imposed upon you by external forces. The pain itself was undeniably real. The initial sting of the wound was undeniable. But the elaborate story the ego meticulously constructed around that pain, the narrative it wove to define your existence, is what kept you imprisoned, what chained you to the past. And now we transition to one of the most transformative truths concerning emotional healing, a principle that can revolutionize your existence. Pain does not dissipate by battling against it, by waging war. It begins to dissolve, to recede, when you consciously embrace it, when you welcome it with a completely different mindset, when you shift your perspective. This is the crucial element that remains largely unaddressed, the secret that is often withheld. We are taught from a tender age to avoid pain at all costs, to shield ourselves from discomfort. Don't cry, we are told. Be strong, we are urged. Don't display weakness, we are warned. Consequently, we learn to relentlessly repress our emotions, to staunch the flow of tears, to deny our vulnerabilities, to run away from anything that threatens to unsettle our fragile equilibrium. But the unvarnished truth is this: what you resist persists. What you fight, you empower. The more vehemently you attempt to suppress emotional pain, the more power it gains over you, the stronger its grip becomes, the louder its voice echoes. Repressed pain does not simply vanish into thin air. It doesn't magically disappear. It buries itself deep within the recesses of your mind. It manifests within your body. It shapes your behavior in insidious ways. It transforms into chronic anxiety, a persistent undercurrent of unease. It morphs into unexplainable anger, a simmering rage that threatens to erupt without warning. It manifests as a pervasive numbness, a detachment from your emotions, a sense of being disconnected from life itself. And the more resolutely you refuse to acknowledge its presence, the deeper it burrows into your subconscious, the more power it exerts over you. Carl Jung grasped this profound truth with unparalleled clarity. He wisely stated, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You cannot achieve genuine healing by simply ignoring your pain, by pretending it doesn't exist. You must confront it completely, honestly, and without any trace of resistance, without any judgment. Think of pain as a force, as an energy. When you push against it, when you resist its presence, it instinctively pushes back with equal force, intensifying its grip. That is why, when you attempt to escape emotions like sadness, grief, or rage, they invariably become even more powerful, their presence more overwhelming. You relentlessly tell yourself not to cry, not to feel, not to break down, to maintain your composure at all costs. You distract yourself with work, with social media, with fleeting pleasures, with anything that can temporarily divert your attention and keep you from being alone with your thoughts. But when you are finally alone, when the external noise subsides, the pain comes rushing back with even greater intensity, like a dam bursting. You hurl blame at others, deflecting responsibility. You blame life, casting yourself as a victim of circumstance. You attempt to convince yourself that the pain is entirely their fault, that you bear no responsibility for your predicament. But as long as you persist in projecting the pain outward, as long as you deflect blame onto external forces, you will never summon the courage to look inward, to confront your own shadows. And that is precisely where true healing commences, the crucible in which transformation occurs. It's not the pain itself that destroys us, that shatters our spirit. It's the resistance to the pain, the constant battle against it, that renders it unbearable, that amplifies its destructive power. So, what is the key to breaking free from this relentless cycle of suffering? How do we escape this prison? Accept the pain, embrace it without reservation. Cease running, halt the frantic escape. Allow yourself to feel completely, consciously, without any trace of judgment, without imposing any restrictions. If you are engulfed by sadness, allow the tears to flow freely. If you are consumed by anger, sit with that anger, acknowledge its presence. Don't act on it impulsively, don't lash out in rage, but don't deny its existence either. Don't bury it alive. Observe the emotion, witness its unfolding, feel it move through your body, experience its physical manifestations. And something incredible, something transformative will begin to unfold, like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. When you cease resisting pain and commence welcoming it as a natural, intrinsic element of the human experience, it starts to relinquish its grip on you. Its power begins to wane. The monstrous figure lurking in the shadows of your mind begins to shrink, its form diminishing. And here is the most beautiful, most liberating truth of all. Nothing lasts forever. Everything is in a state of constant flux. Every emotion, regardless of its intensity, is inherently temporary. It is a fleeting experience. Every wave of suffering will eventually pass, will ultimately recede, if you allow it to, if you surrender to its flow. But when you resist it, when you cling tightly to the narrative, when you incessantly drag the story along with you, you unnecessarily prolong the suffering, stretching it far beyond its natural duration. Healing doesn't happen in the distant future, in some idealized, unattainable realm. It happens in the present moment, in the here and now. In the precise moment you consciously decide to cease running from yourself, to stop evading your emotions, and commence embracing everything you are, wounds and all, flaws and all. That is when you begin to truly transform, to emerge from the chrysalis and take flight. Transform! Carl Jung expounded extensively on the paramount importance of inner transformation, and one of the central tenets of that arduous journey is the understanding of impermanence, the recognition that nothing is static, nothing is fixed, nothing lasts forever, not joy, not pain. Everything is in constant motion, forever shifting. Just like pleasure, pain is temporary, it has a beginning and an end. It does not define you, and it is not eternal. It will eventually fade. Reflect back on the last time you endured a period of intense difficulty. At that time, it may have felt as though you were hopelessly trapped in a storm that would never cease, that would rage for eternity. You may have felt utterly devoid of hope, exhausted beyond measure, convinced that you would never escape the relentless onslaught. But somehow you did survive. You emerged from the storm. You're here now, wiser, more experienced, bearing the scars of your journey, possessing newfound perspectives, forged in the crucible of suffering. You made it through against all odds, and the same unwavering truth holds true for whatever pain you are currently enduring. This too shall pass, it will not last forever. The storm will eventually calm, the clouds will dissipate, and the sun will inevitably rise again, illuminating the path ahead. So, how do we commence the practice of radically accepting pain rather than being consumed by its destructive power? How do we cease being slaves to our own self-inflicted suffering? How do we break free from the prison? There are concrete, actionable steps you can commence practicing immediately. Powerful tools to reclaim your emotional freedom and step into your inherent inner strength, to reclaim your sovereignty. Cease judging your pain. Relinquish the self-criticism. Don't attach labels to it. Don't overanalyze it. Don't dissect every emotion. Don't incessantly bombard yourself with questions like, why am I feeling this way? Or when will this torment finally cease? Instead, simply allow yourself to feel fully and completely, without resistance, without shame, without embellishing with destructive stories. It isn't inherently good or bad. It is neither a blessing nor a curse. It's simply an experience, an energy moving through, you passing through your system. That's all it is, nothing more, nothing less. Observe it within your body, connect to the physical sensations. When you feel anxiety bubbling within your chest, when you are consumed by anger, when grief overwhelms you, when sorrow engulfs your being, don't allow your mind to spin elaborate narratives, to create tales of self-pity, to wallow in the conviction that life is inherently unfair, to construct stories of how irrevocably broken you are. Instead, consciously bring your attention back to your physical body, anchoring yourself in the present moment. Ask yourself, where do I physically feel this emotion within my body? How does it manifest physically inside me? Perhaps it's a tightness in your chest, a constricting sensation, a lump forming in your throat, an obstruction of your breath, trembling hands, a churning sensation in your stomach, or a knot forming in your gut. Simply